All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Resilience is Your Superpower. I'm so happy to be here again. As you may know, we've extended these interviews through the month of May. So we're doing these live YouTubes all through May with amazing women. And I'm so happy to be here. So just to give you some background, the reason why we started Resilience is Your Superpower is because we were rebranding the name for my self-love program for women. It's an 8-week group coaching program that takes you, it's a huge breakthrough to self-love for your own journey. And we were trying to think about what to name it. And I remember my own journey of about 20 years of transformation and all the identity and personality assessments that I did. And oftentimes they would ask the people closest around you to describe you. And so whenever I asked someone, they would always say, Mio, you're resilient. And so that always stuck to me. But then when we were thinking about the name for the program, I realized that every single woman that has taken the program to date has been resilient in her own life, is a resilient woman. So what I did was I wanted to create something in homage to them, in honor of them, of all the women that have taken the program. And I looked around at my community and saw that I'm surrounded by powerful women who are thriving, who are doing things in their life, who have been resilient in their own journeys to get to where they are. And I reached out and the response was amazing. All these amazing women stepped up and said, yes, I want to be in service. I want to give as much as I can to support any woman out there who's going through the same journey. So with that said, today I have an amazing guest. I'm kind of, it's personal for me because I really care a lot about Mia LaMotte. Mia LaMotte is the founder and CEO of LaMotte International, which is a full service image consulting and personal branding coaching firm. She's the host of Brand Disruptors, a podcast, and she's also a certified image consultant. She helps others be seen the way they want to be seen and become better versions of themselves. So I'm super honored to have Mia LaMotte here today. Welcome, Mia.
Thank you.
So
How are
happy.
you today?
Beautiful. Oh, it's raining over here, but other than that, it's a beautiful day. You look lovely.
Well, thank you. So do you. I'm glad to be here. It's amazing. It sounds like you have an amazing community of women too, who are resilient, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so that's what it's all about. It's about, sharing our journeys. It's about, really looking at where we've come from and where we are now, but also where we're going, right?
Yeah.
And so, I always like to preface the conversation with what is resilience, right? Like it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. A lot of us wonder, a lot of us ask, like, what is actually being resilient? What does it mean? And so I always like to preface it by saying that resilience is really a person's ability to handle stress, to handle failure, rejection, criticism, sometimes internal criticism, or oftentimes internal criticism, and life in general, whatever life throws your way.
Yeah.
Resilient people tend to be the ones that know stress happens and learned how to expect it and manage it. Resilient people also possess something that I love, which is called grit. And grit embodies the qualities of courage, conscientiousness, and endurance. So Mia, I always like to give people an idea. Just tell us about you, what you do, what you're up to right now, and then we'll dive into the interview.
Sure. So I agree with those definitions, and I'm definitely going to talk a little bit about what I think about them and why I feel like sometimes they can be dangerous for women of color, right? Because sometimes we can be too resilient for our own good and we don't ask for help. But what I'm up to is really getting people to understand, women of color mostly, to understand that they get to create their destinies. And I know for myself, like I was never taught that, but I was always like, there was always like an inner knowing that that was the truth. And when I first started stepping into it, it was super uncomfortable because, I'm changing the way I think about things. And that's exactly what I do for my clients. Like my podcast is named Brand Disruptors, but so is my coaching club, so is my coaching community. And it's really about changing the way you see yourself and then also seeing your brand, because personal branding, it's just that it's personal and it's really about who you are. And yes, it's about attracting the kind of clients that you want to attract, but it's also about being the kind of person that you want to be. And, I want to give women permission to actually be that. And authenticity gets thrown around too. probably as much as resilience. And, you and I took some of the same courses. So we know that authenticity is really about you being the author of your own life. And that's what I help women do. So I'm excited about it. Like women entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so great. And so tell us what made you, like as you look back at your journey and you are where you are today, what was that thing that made you realize that this is what you wanted to be doing, that you wanted to be dedicating your life to this?
Oh, so many stories. And it's kind of funny that we're talking about this today because I had a potential client that I spoke to earlier, and she and I had a similar journey, and she's 20 something years younger than me, right? And what it was I was introduced to one of those gurus from the stage, Tony Robbins, and we were at one of his seminars where you actually walk against the hot coals. And it was my cousin and I, and we went to the seminar. I was going anyway, and she's like, I'm gonna come and meet you. Well, if you know her, she's kind of flaky. So I was like, she might come, she might not come. So she showed up and then she upgraded our seats. So we were like in the front section. And we were both like deathly afraid that Tony was going to come and call on us because he will embarrass the shit out of somebody, right? And he doesn't do it to embarrass you. He does it to actually get you, changed or
Right.
get you transformed, rather.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when we went to this thing, he really that I had read self-help books before then, but it was at that moment in that seminar that I actually realized that I did have agency and that what I wanted to do was something like this, but I didn't even know what it was called, right? I had to go and research what it was called. And that's how I got into image consulting. And part of my journey was, I got into image consulting because I wanted to be appropriate. I always wanted to be approachable and the person who knew what to do at all times. Well, it didn't really work out that way.
Yeah.
It didn't really work out
Nice
that
try,
way.
right?
Yeah, nice try, but you're not fooling us because actually what it did was made me way more insecure because I was trying to be somebody that I wasn't.
Mm.
And I believe that a lot of women who want to go through the image or the personal branding process, they don't know themselves, so they want somebody else to tell them who they are.
Yep.
And that's my journey. Like I wanted someone else to tell me who I was. And that has to come from within. And it wasn't until that seminar that I gave myself permission to actually even start to think about something other than a 9 to 5 with great benefits and 2 weeks vacation.
Mm.
Right.
Beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so what was the thing though that actually you did mention it. You said that you wanted to be proper and you wanted to like know what to do at all times. Where did that come from? Where do you think that came from? That desire was it to fit in? Was it to look right? Like what was that for you?
I would say it was to fit in. So I grew up in a very rural town in South Louisiana, and my entire family lived around me. So my mom had 7 siblings, and I have 17 first cousins, and so we all grew up together, and we all looked alike. So there was not really any kind of differentiation. Like I knew nothing about race or anything like that when we were growing up until I went to school, and it was a Catholic private school, and I was one of the 2 people of color in this Catholic school for 8 years, right? Or at least in my grade. And so it was definitely one of those needing to fit in things because even in my family, and you might be able to relate to this, even in your family, as a girl, you don't really fit in, right? Because men are superior, they know more, that whatever they make up about, men. I always felt like odd man out, even though I had these great leadership skills. They may be wrong about those too, right? You're bossy, you're too bossy, you talk too much, you're not living up to your potential. These are the kinds of things that I would hear in school. It would be the kind of stuff I would hear at home.
You have to
And
be a lady. Like don't go outside
yeah,
and play with the boys because you have to be a lady, don't.
yeah. And I didn't want to be outside. Like I hated going outside, but my mom kind of forced us out of the house because it helped her to get some peace. And like I said, we all grew up together. So it was a small community and we could play outside then. But my point is that there was so many mixed messages about being authentic and being myself, I felt like I had to be somebody else in order to fit in.
Mm, wow. And so what was that like for you? Like maybe emotionally or psychologically, like what was that like for you, that journey?
I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know it affected me, right?
Mm.
I didn't know it affected me until I started doing this work. And when
And
I
when
think,
wait, for those out there that don't know, when we say this work, we mean transformational work. So it's working with
yes,
yourself and in yourself to transform your life. So just
absolutely. Absolutely. So actually you're uncovering all the wounds that you had, all the trauma. And I think that we underestimate the amount of trauma that we had as children, especially people of color, right?
Mm,
We believe because we're resilient, like our ancestry says that we're resilient,
yep.
right? We
Mhm.
have to be, especially in America. And
And let me just pause you right there a
yeah,
second. When we
yeah,
talk about trauma, because I deal with this a lot with my clients as well, is that a lot of people think, oh, trauma has to be like, sexual assault or like, something really like, that you would read in a magazine or like read in a news story or something. But in reality, trauma can be just something that impacted you personally. It could look like anything. It could look like maybe one day your mom turned to you and raised her voice and she had never raised her voice to you before. And that traumatized you. So trauma has a lot of different faces, a lot of different levels and layers, and it's different for everyone. No two
absolutely.
traumas are alike. So I
Yeah,
just
and
need to preface that. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about sexual abuse, and we were talking about in the context of how women will use food to numb themselves out, but to also put a layer of protection around them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I've never been sexually abused. And she was like, you don't have to have been forcefully penetrated to have been sexually abused. And I was like, what? I never even heard of this. But when she explained to me, like sometimes the looks that you would get or the inappropriate touches that, you might get from a cousin or an uncle or something like that, she's like, that's trauma, that's abuse. And when she said it, I was like, that makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes so much sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Anything that makes us feel uncomfortable is some kind of trauma,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I think that we're opening up to a space in the world today where we're actually talking about these things because they do matter. And we don't have to be these tough people, and we can share these kinds of stories. Like, can you imagine our parents having this conversation, 20 years ago on
I didn't
a
even think
video
of it.
channel? Like they would never
Yeah.
even talk about this kind of stuff,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
It was all hush hush, don't talk about it. Just toe the line, stay between the lines. Like don't speak out. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know.
don't speak out. And here's another thing, because I noticed that I even do it sometimes. I caught myself with this, but I saw somebody post something about, they'll say, don't don't say that this guy did something to you because it's going to ruin his career or his reputation. Never was it about, oh, but it has already ruined me. And
Right.
it's okay for us to be ruined or us to feel bad or guilt or shame, but it's not okay for us to speak our truth. And, I think that we all need to give ourselves permission to first be honest with ourselves about what has happened, but then also be honest with ourselves about who we are. Because that's what's exciting about branding, is that we get on this journey of rediscovery and we peel back all these layers, and then we realize, like you said earlier, what did people, like from your childhood, what do people notice about you all the time?
What did
And
society put on you? What were the effects of your surroundings of, yeah, there's so many layers.
absolutely. And then, for you and for me, like you said, that when you asked people, they said you were very resilient. For me, I've always been a leader. And
Mm.
for both of us, like to really step into that, because it's naturally who we are, right? It's naturally who we are. And to bring that forth into your brand, like that's the biggest thing that you could do for yourself. Like owning yourself unapologetically. And people say it all the time, but until you actually do it, you really don't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and the work that you do is amazing. And just for people out there who think that branding and having a brand only is for people who are entrepreneurs or people who are business owners or something like that, you're a walking brand just in general in your life. You know, you are representing yourself, your principles, your values, your goals. And so anyone can have a personal brand. So it's really important to, when you start looking at yourself, it's like, and it's not about looking at yourself worrying what other people are thinking or saying or how they're going to look at you. It's about looking at yourself and being happy with what you see and being happy with how you're portrayed and feeling authentic and aligned with that. And that's why I love the work that you do, Mia.
Me too. And when I first started doing the work, it wasn't about alignment. It was more about like, the perception, other people's perception. And I know you know who Wayne Dyer is, but
Yes,
he he
ma'am.
said, he said your reputation you cannot manage because your reputation is other people's opinions. And I thought that that was brilliant. He was like, what you can manage though is your character, and when your character and how you show up in the world are aligned, that is your brand, right? That's your brand.
Oh,
It's
beautiful.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's like full integration and alignment. And so let me ask you this. When did you start stepping into your own authenticity? Like when you realized that, towing the line or fitting in or, having that perception didn't work for you anymore and you started stepping into your own, what was that like? Tell us about that.
I would say that I started stepping into it when people started telling me the truth. You and I have done the same transformational training, and it was the first part of it, right? So the very basic part of it. And when I started looking at myself, and people would say, "Look, you don't have to impress to be loved." I'm like, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. Like, this is my work. Like, this is what I do for a living. And then when I started really stepping into what it meant to be authentic and what it meant to not worry about what people thought negative or positive, right? To be
Yes,
really neutral
exactly.
about
Either
that.
way. Mhm.
Yeah, one of the agreements. It's like, oh, so now I get to curse because that's who I am, or now I get to do whatever it is that I feel is part of me and who I am. I get to do those things, and I get to do them without apology, and I get to do them, and not in the kind of way that's going to be harmful to other people. So I want to really be careful about what I mean by this.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was writing Brand Disruptors, I worked with another transformational coach to make sure that it was a transformational program. And
Beautiful.
when we were talking about the title, she was like, I don't know, let's think about disruptors. Do you really want to use the word disruptor? And I was like, absolutely. Like, I know I want to use the word disruptor because I do want to disrupt a pattern, but I'm not trying to be destructive.
Mm.
It's disruption, not destruction.
Hmm.
And there's a fine line between the two. I think that some of the things that are happening in America can be destructive, but I also believe that some of the things that are happening right now are disruption, and it's going to be for our greater good, right? I think we really do need to step into more of the disruption and like start questioning everything.
Yes. Yes, to
Yeah.
be in the question, and it's all about disrupting the pattern. We're very cyclical creatures. We get stuck in these patterns, and it's like you got to bring that disruption because magic happens outside of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Absolutely does. So when you asked me, when did I first start stepping into that? It was that, but it's also when people give you feedback that actually changes your life. You and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier when I said our parents would not, or our mothers would not have been having this conversation 20 years ago. Think about if they had those conversations 20 years ago, how much different our lives would be, right? Like learning how to really tell the truth and honor your feelings, and have your feelings be honored. And you know, I would say every day I step into authenticity because every day I learn a little bit more about myself, or every day I grow a little bit more and really start to let some of those layers, as you say, fall away. Like the ones that I thought I needed to put on for, well, for protection, or for, um, you know, my own, the own patterns that I believed that were true that really weren't.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That essentially end up being like limiting beliefs
Yeah.
in essence.
Yeah.
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 That somebody else gave to me. Right.
Right. Right. And you mentioned about, when people gave you feedback, but also like not only getting the feedback, but being open and ready to receive the feedback, right?
Oh, girl. Huh. Yeah, because somebody gave me feedback in the past. I would have been on the floor, passed out, so upset. Like, I can't believe they thought this of me and how dare they? And oh my God, like I was the worst.
Right.
And now when people give me feedback, I'm like, okay, it's feedback. Let me see what about this might or might not be true,
Right.
including what I tell myself, right?
Yeah,
Especially what I tell myself.
exactly.
Because we do things like somebody said something about a behavior is not who you are, right? What you do is what you do, but you can make mistakes and you can do things, but it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. And I think that I know for myself, when growing up, when I did something bad, I was considered a bad child or a bad girl or a bad woman, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that stays with you until you
Yeah.
realize that you come to your own and you realize, okay, what am I going to redefine for myself? How am I going to step into what's real for me?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I think, who does that? Who questions themselves about this kind of stuff on a daily basis? I think that, being home in this last year, that a lot of us are opening ourselves up to this, which I so appreciate, being able to sit back and have that time, even though I was depressed as hell, right? I was depressed as hell. I was one of those Netflix and chill kind of people for at least the first 6 months, because I just wanted to numb out. I didn't want to think about COVID. I didn't want to think about people dying. I didn't want to think about the unrest, the civil unrest in the country. So I checked out, and I can admit that, but I'm back, right? I'm back and I was still functioning. Like, there's something about resiliency and functioning in depression.
Mm,
And I believe that we do that a lot, women in general, right? I haven't really shared this with a whole lot of people, but my grandmother on my dad's side, she committed suicide
mm,
after she had her last child. And I did not find out about that until I was 22, 23 years old. And it was from my stepmom.
wow.
And because nobody ever talked about it, we never questioned it. It was almost like, don't even ask. And we didn't. But when I found out and I started digging a little bit deeper with like when she passed away, what the circumstances were, I was like, she probably had postpartum depression that went unaddressed and nobody knew how to treat it. Nobody knew what it was. And she's like, I just rather not be here anymore. And they just swept it under the rug. And it was just this cloud of shame on
Mm,
my dad's part. Cause like I said, I didn't even know that my grandmother had passed that way or she, had killed herself. And I think it's so important for us to be having these conversations because, you know, people's lives are important.
yeah.
And if we're not having these conversations and people don't understand their value.
Yeah,
And I'm
absolutely.
just like all over the place. So I'm sorry if I'm getting off a topic and
No,
like
no, no. This is great. It's funny that you say that because I actually too recently found out that I have suicide in my ancestral line on my dad's side. And
mhm,
so I was like, wow, that's interesting, and like going into that and questioning that and finding out more about that and healing that because we can heal like our ancestral line 7 generations back and 7 generations ahead. So, doing that ancestral work and connecting with that, but also something that you pointed to, which is so important. And it's really about being in the question, being in the question about you, about your life, about your surroundings, about your family, like just question yourself, question society, question, because it's not about the answers, it's about the questions.
mhm.
More transformation and more breakthroughs and more healing comes out of the questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
so
especially when we're quiet and sit long enough to get the answer for us,
yes,
right?
yes.
Not waiting for someone to tell us, but getting it for ourselves.
Oh, yes. Write that down, people. That's a golden nugget right there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You
And
were going to
so
ask me something? I'm sorry.
yeah. So I wanted to pivot a little the conversation to something that, for those of us who are resilient, in our journeys, it tends to happen a lot. And it's something that has like a stigma on it. and it's the word called failure.
Mm.
And, no one likes to talk about failure, but what is a failure really? So as you look back on your journey to get to where you are now, have you had any instances where you feel like you've had a perceived failure, and how did you overcome that, and what opened up for you from that as a result?
All kinds of failures or all kinds of perceived failures. But when I look at my whole journey, like if I had not had those perceived failures, I would not be here where I am today. I'd probably still be in Louisiana working a dead end government job and really not participating in life the way that I do now, right? And not serving people in the way that only I can. I was serving, but I was serving under someone else's tutelage, right? I was serving how they wanted me to serve. And so I think that these failures that are perceived, like I dropped out of beauty school, and that could have been a perceived failure. I did graduate college and I went to a master's program, but I didn't really want to be doing that work, right?
Mm,
I just did it because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And then as an entrepreneur, like there's a failure every day.
mm,
There's a
yeah.
failure every day. There's a client that's not going to sign with you. There's a contract that you mess up. There's an email that is a typo. There's like all kinds of stuff that can really get under my skin. And so what I love about entrepreneurship is that it teaches me that there are no failures unless I let it be a failure, right? And
Right.
even if I make the mistake over and over and over and over again, at some point, I'm going to get it, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
get that there's a better way to do this. Cause I was talking to my niece about it. I was like, look, I know I'm smart. So how do I figure this out? Right? Let me just keep doing the things. Let me do some investigation. Let me do some questioning and really looking at what I thought was a failure. What was the lesson? What do I not want to do in that? And then how can I teach somebody else in a way that they get it and they don't want to do it too?
Yes. Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Because we learn from others' mistakes as well. And it's very powerful to be able to learn, like from the people that surround you, like, hey, don't take that route because, I took that route and it's not a good one. And you're like, okay, so let me, that's helpful too. That's beneficial.
It
But
absolutely is.
you mentioned you dropped out of beauty school.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like a perceived failure, right? Society, oh my God, you dropped out of beauty school, you're never going to make it or whatever. So what opened up for you as a result of that? Because you're here now today, you overcame that. So what was it that opened up for you?
From the dropping out, um,
Did you take a different path? Did you?
actually I did. So when I dropped out of beauty school, I did some modeling for a very short time and I worked at a modeling agency and it was commission only. And it had me realize like early on, like I need to work for someone. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have that kind of spirit, which was total BS because what I didn't want to put myself out there.
Mm,
I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to get the rejection. I didn't want to be the face of my own company, which is so funny because now that's exactly, who I am. But back then, it just put me down a different path. And actually the lesson, if I'm looking at it now, and I'm glad you asked me because I never even thought about it. But if I look at it now, it was more about, you see, you actually did have everything that you needed to do then. You could have done it then. But now that you have more maturity and you've already been down this other road, you know that this is not the one that you want. That was the one that you always wanted. And so that I can help people with, like, honoring your desires instead of listening to like sage advice.
mm,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would say that was the lesson.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I always like to replace the failure with another F word. So failure is one F word. I like to replace it with another F word, which is feedback. And you
Yeah.
mentioned feedback earlier. And
Yeah.
so, failure really is about feedback. It's about, you made that mistake. Like you said, you made that mistake. You might make it over and over and over, but you're
Mhm.
getting data, you're getting information from that. And so
Yeah.
then you can like pivot and, improve and tweak and change things and transform. And so it actually gives you feedback. So then you can move forward. If we're not making mistakes, how do we know where we are? How do we know what we're doing?
Yeah, and then when you have people around you, Mio, like I have my cousin, she very successful businesswoman, and I sent her a text yesterday, like I needed some help with financing, and so today we got on the phone, and she was just like, okay, so what's going on? What can we do? What's the, like what's the solutions? And it was very, very neutral, and it was this, like, you're not a stupid person, you didn't mess it up, it was none of that. Like there was no level of blame from her, but what was going on in my head before I even sent her the text was way worse than anything that would have come out of her mouth, right? And
Yes.
so for me, like that feedback, like I had already perceived the failure myself, right? And when we got on the phone and she helped me to troubleshoot or do the feedback part of this, it was just like, oh, well, who can you do? What can we do now? What do we do now? Like, how do we fix this? Or how do we move forward? And that to me is what it means to have an entrepreneurial spirit. It's not about, oh, do you have your own business and your own jobs and, create jobs and things like that. Is, do you have the kind of mindset that you can overcome challenges really easily and not get stuck in the I'm a failure kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. And even also on a personal level, like how often do we, like, the inner critic, the negative Nancy is constantly running inside. And so as you're doing anything in your life, you're constantly like, oh no, I'm not going to do that because they'll do this, or this will happen, or I'm not going to take that chance because this or that or that or this. And you're right. It's like you stop yourself before you even take that risk and take that opportunity.
Yeah, because you talk yourself out of it
Yeah.
because you think you know what somebody's going to do. And people will actually, like, I have been blown away by the level of support that I have gotten from family, from non-family members about what I'm doing. I mentioned to you, like, I got depressed over this last year, and my family came for Christmas, and my cousin, she came back for Easter, and she's like, oh my God, you're doing so much better. She was like, because I just didn't think that you were happy. And when she said that, I was like, she could tell. Like, I thought I was putting up a really good front. And it actually made me want to cry because I was like, oh, I must have been really freaking miserable for her to notice that, you know? And yeah, I think that we just, we got to take that stuff, we got to roll with it, but we also got to honor ourselves and be like, you know what? I need a break. I need some help. I need something. I don't know
Yes.
what it is, but I need something, and asking for it.
Absolutely. Actually, that's one of the things that we get into in these interviews, which is like, you know, when we're those of us who are resilient, oftentimes we've had to get here on our own. We've had to grab the bull by the horns and make things happen. And it's a lonely path. And if it's gonna get done, it's gonna get done right by me. So like having that whole, come from. And so when it's time to actually open yourself up and receive support and ask for support, it's almost like it's like a foreign thing. It's like, I don't even, like, I went through, in my personal journey, I went through a time where I wasn't asking anyone for help because I was so ashamed. I thought that I had like major imposter syndrome. So I thought everything I was doing was wrong. Everything, I was a total, F up, and, everything I was doing was wrong. So I wouldn't even want to ask a question because I didn't want to show everyone that I was wrong, that I didn't know what I was doing. And so I wouldn't ask for
Hmm.
help.
Hmm.
And so I love that you mentioned help. You've actually mentioned it a couple of times already on this call. And it's like, what has that been like for you in your journey to becoming an entrepreneur and doing what you do now? Like the process of opening yourself up to support, allowing support in, receiving support. What has that been like for you?
It's been tough because I would typically go to the same source over and over and over and over and over again. And that source wasn't the source that I needed to be going to,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Source is within or above, as you say. Everything else is a resource. So I wasn't going within, I wasn't listening to myself. I was going on based on past evidence, right? I was going based on past evidence. And that's not the way that I live. Well, let me say, my intention is not to live from that place as
Mm,
much anymore. My intention is to live more from within, to listen to myself, and to really just be like, be okay with no, right? Nope, I can't help you with that right now. And not hold people hostage to their no's or to their yeses,
right.
right?
Yes.
Because I would have done that too. Like, oh, why can't you help me? Like, it's your responsibility to help me. And then on the flip side is like, no, I can do this all by myself, which is total BS. Like, everybody needs help from somewhere, some point in their journey.
Yeah, we're
We all
tribal
do.
creatures. We're based on community. We thrive when we're together, when we're helping each other. You know, I may have a weakness in something that you have a strength in, and vice versa, and we can support each other. You know, community is so important, especially during these times. You know, everything that we're going through today in society. It's like, you know, like lean on your people. You know, lean on your contacts. Ask for support. You know, I'm a big advocate of therapy and of coaching and counseling and all these resources that one can reach out to. Even a friend. I mean, I had years that my best friend was like my therapist, you know, and I was
Mhm,
like, I feel like I leaned on her too much too. It was like, you know, for so
mhm.
many years, but you know, it was what I had at the moment, and it's what got me through, you know. So definitely that's super important.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this, and as we wrap up here, I have a couple more questions for you. What, if anything, were some of the things that you had to overcome within yourself to actually be where you are today? Like, what are some of the challenges you had to overcome to be here today?
I would say the biggest one is self-trust. Um, I make up stuff all the time. Like, I'm going to do this and then I don't do it. So it makes it really hard for me to trust myself. And I also don't listen, like, always listen to the inner voice. So building that trust muscle is paramount. I would say that's number one. Number two is like really get to know yourself really well. And you talked about personality assessments and things like that. I believe those things are amazing. And then asking people um, who you were as a child, because your purpose is somewhere between the two, right?
Mm,
And then the third thing is like be unapologetic about who you are. Stop trying to save face. Stop trying to be the perfect mom, the perfect boss, the perfect entrepreneur. Like, let it get messy. Because what I've learned, like, I never wanted stuff to get messy. But what I've learned is when things get messy, that's where that's where the message for them and for me lies. Right? We tend to find out like what we've been missing, right? You find out what's been missing when you get messy. So those are probably the top three things that I would say. Um, I forgot even the question, but I think those are the answers that I
that you
want to give for that.
yeah, that you had to overcome.
Yeah. So things I've overcome, and I shared with you before the interview was that I was a widow at 33, and I could have totally used that as a like, woe is me. I can't go on. Like, life is so unfair kind of thing. And I didn't. Like, that whole experience was actually the thing that propelled me to get to where I am today. I got a master's degree after that, um, even though I'd been out of school for 10 years. And I moved to a whole nother state, got into a different relationship. Like, that probably was the biggest thing that changed my whole life and
Wow.
for the better.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're a widow at 33, and your life probably caved in, like you
Yeah.
lost even your identity probably,
Yeah.
and you had to rebuild yourself, and you actually like were so resilient. That's where resiliency kicks in, right? And you're like,
Mhm.
and you just like put your big girl panties on, and you're like, all right, I'm going for my master's. I'm going for my... That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, and that's how I already registered for school before he was killed in a car accident, and
Mm,
I'd already registered for the semester in January. He died in December,
mm,
and I almost didn't go. And I was like, "Girl, are you crazy? You better get your butt in school. And what else are you going to be doing?"
wow.
And it was the best decision that I made. I got to hang out with people that were like 10 years younger than me. So that's always fun because I get to see more innovation. You get to see, how people are living,
Yeah.
and you get to see a whole different train of thought, the way other people think. And like, I would not trade that experience for anything. Like I said, it changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Wow. And so all this, everything you had to overcome to be here, thriving in this, you have a coaching practice for branding and um, self-identity and redefining yourself. You've redefined yourself. You've connected to your authenticity. You've overcome your own internal challenges, external challenges, race, being a widow at 33, so many different things. And so when you look back on your journey, what's that one thing that you take with you as like knowledge that you've acquired or a learning, a teaching that you've acquired for yourself through all of that you'll take with you in the future?
That I get to choose.
Mm,
I'm always at choice, and I get to choose the thought, the food, the ride. Like, I'm always at choice. And when I know that, or when I remember that, because sometimes I forget.
sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I remember that I'm always at choice, things just seem to just turn around and disappear or work itself out. And I'm always choice is actually, it feels like a miracle sometimes.
Mm, yes, because choice means you're coming from the come from of I'm the creator of this versus I'm the victim of this.
Absolutely.
From
And I'm open to every or endless possibilities.
right, exactly. So
Yeah.
you go from things happening to you to actually creating the things that you want to happen in your life. And so
Yep.
there's a huge power and freedom in that. So that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And then lastly, Mia, and you've been amazing. I could talk to you for hours. We could dive into we might have to bring
we
you back, girl.
Okay. I'm happy to do that. Happy to do it.
Because we can break down a lot of things you said, but just for the viewers out there who are watching this live or who may come and see the replay later, we always like to leave them with a few words of wisdom.
Hmm.
So for those audience members out there who may be on a similar journey of resilience, what
Hmm.
would you tell them? What would be a few words of wisdom you would give them on their journey?
Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Like, it's okay to be resilient. It's okay to be tough, but it's also okay to be soft and sensual and and childlike, right? Like, take care of yourself and know what that really means for you, right? Taking care of yourself is not checking out with a bunch of wine or a bunch of food. Like, trust me, I know.
Yeah, me too.
Right? It's more about like getting quiet, listening to your inner voice, the still voice within, and really, really, really understanding who you are at your core.
Mm, yes,
Yeah.
beautiful,
Thank
beautiful.
you.
And hopefully, with that, the viewers out there will continue to honor themselves. Thank you so much, Mia. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Beautiful. And for all of you guys out there, remember, we're going to be here through the month of May. We're going to be here on Wednesdays and Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern live. So make sure to come on, comment. If we didn't get to your comments during the live, we will circle back and answer any questions that you might have. Resilience, a breakthrough journey to self-love starts on May 31st. So please visit my website at miosantana.com for more info on that. And also, like I always say, be kind to yourselves. Be kind to yourselves and be kind to one another. Love yourself. And we will see you